I never thought that my journey to becoming a stepmother would bring me to this point. I knew it wouldn't be easy, especially for Jake, when I married his father. The last thing I wanted was to put him in a situation that felt so alien to him after he had recently lost his mother. Jake remained solitary, withdrawing into his chamber as though it were a stronghold. Every time I knocked, I offered him food or invited him to supper, but he always said no. I had a twinge of sorrow. It felt like I was interfering with his grief, even though I was there to assist in starting a new family. Then everything changed, one stormy night. The house became completely dark as the power went out. My little daughter Lily was whimpering in the living room, and I could hear it. She was clearly shaken by the storm, despite my best efforts to calm her. At that moment, I heard a noise coming from the corridor. I called quietly, "Jake, we can wait it out together if you come here." He joined us, which surprised me. After we lighted candles, I started sharing memories about my early years that were filled with adventure and fun. I didn't expect the connection that blossomed between Jake and me as I saw his eyes light up. We exchanged dreams and anxieties, and gradually the barriers Jake had erected around himself started to come down. Something changed inside of me while the storm raged outside. Jake was more than my stepson anymore. He was a young man dealing with his loss, and all I wanted at the time was to be a comfort to him. However, troubles accompanied that friendship. I began to observe Jake's gaze, how it lingered a bit too long, how he grinned at my jokes, and how our chats took on a weight I hadn't anticipated. I made an effort to ignore such feelings, telling myself it was only the bond we had made after discovering our vulnerabilities. I sat in the adjacent armchair one evening as Jake slept on the couch. As I watched him, a mixture of love and worry weighed heavily on my heart. He appeared so content, engrossed in his dreams, and I realized how much I wanted to preserve that purity. However, my emotions grew more nuanced the more I watched. As the days went by, Jake and I became more tense. I had to walk a tightrope between my job as his stepmother and the indisputable bond we had developed. I started to doubt all of my preconceived notions about limits as every shared laugh and lingering look seemed charged. Jake was sitting on the porch one evening when the sun was setting in a variety of brilliant hues. With an unspoken weight in the air, I joined him. I sensed a change in the mood, almost like electricity humming in the air, while we discussed everyday topics like school and Lily's antics. "Do you ever consider making a fresh start?" My voice was gentle as I asked. His face was solemn as he turned to face me. It can be challenging to understand what moving on actually entails at times. His voice struck a deep chord with me because of its sensitivity. I talked about my own hardships, including how challenging it was to fill the vacuum left by my late husband. It was an honest moment, and as we talked about our regrets and anxieties, I could feel our bond growing. Then I leaped. "I have to tell you something, Jake. I've been experiencing a unique connection with you. I'm afraid, but it's true." I saw the look of surprise on his face as his eyes expanded. He said, "I feel it too," in a voice that was almost audible above a whisper. "But it's really unclear." "That's right." With my heart pounding, I answered, "I don't want to hurt anyone, least of all you. However, I can't act as though I don't care about you." We both jumped when a loud clap of thunder cut off our chat. It seemed metaphorical, as if the storm outside mirrored the inside conflict. The weight of our emotions weighed heavily in the air as we sat in quiet. At that moment, Lily's diminutive figure emerged in the doorway, silhouetted against the illumination. "Come on in, Mom and Jake. It's becoming dark outside." Our moment was shattered by her innocence, and I couldn't get rid of the feeling that things had changed forever as we went back inside. Everything felt different after that night, and there were a lot of unsaid feelings in the air. During dinner, I observed how Jake would look at me and smile at my jokes with a warmth that made me quiver. I knew we were treading carefully, and it was both exhilarating and terrible. Jake was sitting close by when I was in the kitchen one afternoon making dinner, completing a project for school. As I sliced vegetables and glanced at him, the air was filled with the aroma of spices. He was focused intently, and I was overcome with a wave of love that I could not control. "Do you need assistance?" Breaking my reverie, he asked. I gave him a knife and said, "Just chopping veggies. Come with me." Our laughter swirled about us as we prepared side by side, mingling with the warmth of the occasion. However, my heart raced as the tension crackled like static electricity with every brush of our arms. I struggled to prevent my mind from going in directions I didn't want to go. We watched a movie in the living room after supper. Lily cuddled up to us. Jake's presence beside me was palpable, and every laugh we shared had deep significance. His features were highlighted by the flickering screen, which also brought out the perplexity and longing that were briefly visible in his eyes. Jake leaned in halfway through, and our shoulders made contact. As our eyes locked, I felt a magnetic draw toward him that made my breath catch. Jake turned to face me as a flash of lightning suddenly lit up the room, his face displaying a mixture of exhilaration and apprehension. "Can we have a conversation?" His voice was low as he whispered. As we went out onto the porch, I nodded, my heart racing. We were surrounded by chilly evening air, and I was filled with excitement. He began, hesitating as though he was carefully considering what he was about to say, concerning what we had previously discussed. I can no longer deny my feelings. His admission thrilled me, but I knew we needed to proceed with caution. "Jake, I sense it too, but we must exercise caution. Lily and your father cannot be impacted by this." He was obviously struggling with the gravity of our predicament as he gazed down. "What if there is something significant about this connection, something that promotes healing for both of us?" A lump started to grow in my throat. "It might be, but we must take responsibility for it. I don't wish to cause harm to anyone, I love you, but let's clarify what that means." At that moment, Lily showed up at the door and beckoned us inside. I felt a twinge of sadness as I saw Jake pull away as the moment broke. We had a lot to manage, and I could feel the delicate equilibrium we were attempting to preserve. I was unable to ignore how seriously I felt about Jake as the days passed in a whirl of awkward silences, laughter, and quick glances. There was now an unavoidable undercurrent in our once harmless chats. Every moment we spent together felt important, full of a depth that made me feel both excited and afraid. I asked Jake to join me for a stroll in the local park one day, in the hopes that the fresh air would help us both think more clearly. We were surrounded by a golden glow as the sunshine seeped through the trees. I sensed the tension between us growing as we walked, like a tautly wrapped spring about to break. "Clara." Jake started out in a steady yet passionate voice. "I've been reflecting about our conversation and our relationship. This isn't anything to ignore, is it?" With a pounding heart, I inhaled deeply. "No, it isn't. However, we must exercise caution. The stakes are really high. Your father? Lily? I don't wish to cause harm to anyone." With my comments weighing heavily on him, he nodded. "I understand. What if, however, this connection is just what we both require? What if its purpose is to aid in our recovery?" I could relate to his sincerity. My own weakness came to the surface. I need to make sure we're on the same page before I can investigate this. We cannot allow the situation to spiral out of hand. Jake took a step toward me and met my eyes. "Let's go slowly. Honesty, no secrets. Together, we can solve this." I felt a wave of relief. I sensed that the tension was subsiding and that a cautious course of action was taking its place. I said softly, "One step at a time." I felt as though a burden had been removed as we made our way back home. We had a strategy, a mutual understanding that would enable us to work through this challenging relationship. I lay in bed that night with a lot on my mind. I reflected on Jake's mother, my late husband, and the delicate equilibrium we were attempting to preserve. A few days later, I woke up in the wee hours of the morning to find the house still silent. I crept into the living room with the intention of grabbing a book. I noticed Jake's door was ajar as I passed his room. I was drawn in by the gentle glow of light that flowed out. When I knocked softly, Jake's voice could be heard. "Enter." He was reading while sitting up in bed. When our eyes locked, I experienced a wave of emotions. Fear, longing, and comfort. "Not able to sleep?" As I entered, I inquired. "No," he said, a faint smile appearing. "Just pondering." Our bond was evident in the silent room as I sat on the edge of his bed. "What is it about?" With my heart pounding, I inquired. With a steady stare, he spoke softly about us. "Clara, I want to tell you the truth. This is the first time I've ever felt this strongly about someone." I took a deep breath, aware of how crucial this moment was. "Jake, I haven't either. In addition to being novel and terrifying, it's also lovely. He softly took my hand as he reached out. I felt goosebumps from the warmth of his touch, which ignited an uncontrollable flame. Whatever this is, I want to solve it. I'd rather not lose you. I understood then that the emotions we were struggling with went beyond simple infatuation. If we handled it wisely, they were a bond that may aid in our recovery. Let's make a commitment to communicate, I replied, holding his hand tightly. We'll go slowly and ensure that each step we take is pleasant for us both. Agreed, he murmured, his face serious. A feeling of calm descended upon me as I sat there holding my stepson's hand. Although we were in unfamiliar territory, we could create something lovely if we were sincere and understanding, something that looked forward a bright future while paying respect to our pasts. I leaned down to give him a forehead kiss as a consoling and reassuring gesture while keeping that in mind. Although I was aware that we still had a long way to go, I felt optimistic about the future for the first time.